So, imagine spending 2 entire months, right, like nights and weekends, just building this custom task manager completely from scratch. You're writing code for iOS, macOS, you're accessing over the interface.
Oh man, that sounds exhausting already.
Right. And then, out of nowhere, on a random Tuesday, you stumble across this free 94-line piece of code on the internet that already does the exact same thing.
Oh, I would be furious. Most people would literally just throw their computer out the window at that point.
Exactly. But our subject today, he just threw his 2 months of code in the trash, swapped to that 94-line shim, and just kept building. So welcome to this deep dive.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So on our last deep dive, which was episode 5 of this Digital Thoughts AI from the Trenches series, we looked really honestly at capacity discipline, right? Like the hard limits of the cloud, the machine, and our own brains.
Right, the physical and mental constraints.
Yeah, exactly. But today, for episode 6, we're pivoting to the motivation behind the grind. We're looking at why. Like, why you would ever build your own tools when these perfectly good, factory-made apps already exist everywhere.
It's it really is the defining paradox for anyone who tinkers with tech today. Because you have these massive, highly funded companies basically giving away incredibly powerful software for free, or I mean for pennies, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And yet there's this very specific subset of people who just insist on starting from a blank screen. They're knee-deep in their own broken code, trying to reinvent the wheel.
Which brings us to our guide for today, Paul. He's an e-commerce manager who decided to build his own personal AI agent from the ground up. He calls it Wiz, and he built it using Claude Code.
Right, Claude Code.
And the central claim we're exploring today from his 3-part post series, it kind of challenges the way we usually think about software. Basically, the point of building your own tools isn't the final artifact itself. The point is the understanding.
I love that, the understanding.
Right. And the ultimate payoff, it only really arrives when that thing you finally understand starts working for someone you love.
Yeah, and moving from that, like purely technical, almost stubborn pursuit, to a deeply human payoff. It requires us to first look at the messy reality of how a project like this actually starts. Because Paul is remarkably transparent about his failures over the last 2 years.
Oh, yeah. The graveyard of his personal projects is completely packed.
It really is. I mean, he talks about this app from 2024, the Suggestions app, that he was just completely obsessed with at the time.
Oh, right. And today he's like, yeah, it's not even an app anymore. It's just totally dead.
Exactly. And then there's that 2-month custom Kanban dashboard project you mentioned earlier. He built this massive thing just to manage his AI's tasks, only to find out that a tiny script on top of an open source tool called Fizzy handled it way better.
Yeah, Fizzy. He just abandoned all his native apps and switched over. He even admits that he constantly breaks his own daily setup just by messing around too heavily with his agent's underlying code.
It sounds incredibly frustrating, honestly.
It sounds like pure chaos. But he's articulating this very specific philosophy here, which is, I learn through process, not by reading.
That's fascinating because we tend to really privilege book learning.
Yeah.
This idea that you can just absorb a mental model from a manual or a YouTube tutorial.
Right, but Paul frames his approach through the lens of his ADHD. He says you just have to work with the brain you actually have, and his brain only retains information when it actively builds, breaks, and repairs the system itself.
Putting your hands in the dirt, basically.
Yeah, exactly. But I do have to push back on this a little bit because in the AI space right now, the alternatives are just staggering. Take something like OpenClaw.
Oh, yeah. OpenClaw is massive.
Right. It has, 347,000 stars on GitHub. It works straight out of the box. Installing OpenClaw is basically like being handed the keys to a beautiful, pre-built, move-in-ready mansion.
That's a great way to put it.
But building it yourself, the way Paul is doing, it's like building a house from scratch. Sure, you learn a lot about architecture, but you also end up living in a house where you literally duct tape the plumbing together on a random Tuesday because you were just exhausted. So, why take the duct tape route when the mansion is free?
Well, because when the plumbing eventually breaks in that free mansion, and it will break,
Yeah.
you're totally locked out of the utility closet. You just have to sit there and wait for the original architect to issue an update.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, like when you use OpenClaw, sure, you can configure what you bought, but your understanding is limited to just the surface level settings they actually allow you to touch. When you build the system yourself, knowing exactly where the duct tape is means you know how all the underlying variables interact. Paul drops this crucial line in his writing. He says, you actually choose what you understand.
Wow. Choosing what you understand, that's a heavy statement.
It really is. By building Wiz from scratch, he isn't just choosing to understand a final piece of software. He's choosing to understand the fundamental mechanisms of AI itself. He's forcing himself to learn how context windows actually parse data, how agents route decisions.
Where all the failure points live.
Exactly. The understanding is the real product. The software is just like a byproduct of that education.
Okay, so if the entire point is acquiring that really granular understanding, how does that actually translate into the code of his agent? Because the claim here is that this hands-on approach is the exact reason Wiz actually gets smarter over time, while off-the-shelf tools just kind of plateau.
Right. So 6 months into running Wiz, he started it in October 2025, by the way. Paul came to this realization that challenges almost all the current marketing hype right now. He realized that memory is just the entirely wrong abstraction for how an AI learns.
I found that so counterintuitive, considering every major AI platform right now is, selling itself so heavily on its new memory features.
I know, but the problem is our own human bias. We imagine AI memory as like a notebook. We think the AI is writing down little facts about us and flipping back through those pages to remember our preferences.
Right, like it's a person taking notes.
Exactly, but the reality of large language models is totally different. The model has no persistent human-like memory. It's just rereading the entire text history again and again every single time you prompt it within this limited context window.
So it's basically just starting from scratch every time, but reading super fast.
Pretty much. And once Paul understood that mechanism, he just stopped trying to build a digital notebook. Instead, he built a really strict corrections pipeline.
Yeah, he calls it a corrections loop, and he breaks it down into 3 specific stages: capture, classify, and graduate. Let's walk through how this actually functions day to day. Because Paul says when he's working, he doesn't want to pause and write some massive, formal set of prompt instructions just to fix a tiny mistake the AI made.
Nobody wants to do that.
Right, he just wants to course correct naturally.
And the mechanism he built for this is actually quite elegant. So let's say the AI summarizes a document for him and includes a bunch of unnecessary hyperlinks. Paul might just type a quick, casual sentence like, "I would not link that." Or maybe, "Stop confirming every step." That natural language command, that's the capture phase.
Okay, so it just grabs that sentence.
Yeah, the agent takes those casual words and drops them into a temporary queue.
Which leads to the next step, which is classify. That's where those casual words get translated into something the machine can actually understand and use. He mentions running the text through a regex map to sort it into specific categories. Now, for those of us who aren't, software engineers, how does a regex map extract intent from a casual sentence?
Good question. So regex stands for regular expressions. You can think of it as this incredibly strict, literal pattern matching bouncer at the door of the database.
A bouncer, okay.
Yeah. It doesn't understand human language the way an AI does. It just looks for exact structural shapes in the text. So if the regex bouncer sees the command structure stop action, it immediately recognizes that as a behavioral command. It tags that correction as a rule.
Oh, I see.
Or if Paul says, "Use plain text here," the regex might tag it as preference. And Paul's system has 7 of these regex patterns that map into 6 distinct categories like skill misuse or rule.
Which sets up this unspoken contract that I think anyone who uses AI just desperately wants. You should never have to correct the agent twice on the exact same mistake.
Yes. Never say it twice.
And that brings us to the final phase, graduate.
Right. So every night, a background process drains that temporary queue of captured corrections. Depending on how the regex classified them, the system sends each correction to one of 4 very specific memory sinks. And each of those sinks has its own decay curve.
Wait, decay curve? How does the system know what should decay and what should become permanent?
It relies entirely on those classifications we just talked about. So if a correction is highly specific to the current task, like make this paragraph shorter, it goes into a short-term working memory sink. And that just decays as soon as the project is done.
That makes sense.
But if the correction is classified as a core rule, it goes into a permanent memory sink that never decays. It essentially rewrites the agent's fundamental persona file.
There is a really specific story he tells that illustrates this perfectly. He has this research-focused persona within his system called Atlas.
Oh, the Reddit incident.
Yes, the Reddit incident. One night, Atlas hallucinated a bunch of Reddit thread IDs. It brought back all these links that just resulted in 403 errors, and the entire task completely failed.
Yeah.
For anyone unfamiliar, what exactly broke there?
So a 403 error basically means forbidden. Reddit servers detected that an automated bot was trying to scrape their data, so they just slammed the door shut and refused access.
Right. So the task fails. But because of this capture classify graduate loop, by the very next morning, the system had automatically written a permanent, non-negotiable rule into its own core file. The rule literally read, Atlas cannot hit reddit.com directly due to 403. Fetch via Firecrawl or browser playwright first, then pass verified URLs.
It's so smart because to bypass that 403 error, the rule forces the AI to use Firecrawl, which is a tool that essentially acts like a real human browser. It tricks the server into letting the data through. And Paul notes that this specific failure, the Reddit hallucination, it is never come back, not once.
That is wild. But what fascinates me is the discipline required to maintain this whole architecture, because Paul put these incredibly strict guardrails in place to prevent the system from degrading. The first rule is that a correction never expires unaddressed. It either drains from the queue into a memory sink, or it gets escalated to Paul directly. It cannot just quietly age out and be forgotten.
And the reasoning there is psychological as much as it is technical. Paul says if corrections just quietly expire, the agent stops feeling like it's actually learning the hard stuff,
Yeah.
And it starts feeling like it's just skimming the easy preferences.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Now, the second guardrail requires swallowing a little bit of pride about, the dream of pure hands-off automation. Paul says you can never let the model grade its own homework in private.
Never.
Yeah, every single rule that attempts to graduate into permanent memory has to cross a human-reviewed card table on a platform called Basecamp.
Right, Basecamp. It's a project management tool. Essentially, the AI creates this visual card that says, hey, I want to add this permanent rule to my core persona based on your feedback. And Paul physically has to look at that card and click approve before the code is actually updated.
That's a huge safeguard.
It has to be. If you let an AI hallucinate a bad reflection about your preferences and then prominently reinforce it in secret, you've completely lost control of the agent. The human in the loop is literally the only thing that keeps the learning honest.
And he actually shared some data on this process. Over a 30-day period, he tracked his corrections. He logged 22 corrections overall, but that number dropped to 18 in the last 7 days. At the same time, his task success rate was sitting at like 93.5% over 30 days.
That's incredibly high.
It is. But we have to look at Paul's own honest caveat here. Is the agent actually getting smarter, or is Paul just getting tired of correcting it? Like, is the system genuinely learning, or is it just getting quieter because the human is experiencing behavioral fatigue?
Well, Paul readily admits this data is based on a sample size of one user running one specific workload on one machine. So, pinch of salt.
Right.
However, he argues that the human-reviewed card table provides qualitative proof. He isn't just looking at the sheer volume of corrections, he's looking at the themes. The standard for success isn't an agent that never ever breaks. The standard is seeing fewer repeats of the exact same conceptual mistake. And on that metric, his bespoke system totally outpaces generic tools.
And he describes the user experience in such a compelling way. He says an agent that learns through this specific pipeline, it stops feeling like standard software, and it starts behaving like more of you.
Like an extension of yourself.
Yeah.
And when you have an architecture that acts like an extension of your own logic, the next logical step is to point that whole stack at a real-world problem. And this is where we shift from, technical tinkering to tangible impact.
Which brings us to Act 3, the job finder agent. I mean, if you've looked for a job recently, the signal-to-noise ratio on platforms like LinkedIn is just brutal.
Oh, it's a nightmare. The algorithms push roles that don't match your skills. The alerts are stale. It's just a massive drain on your time.
Exactly. So Paul decided to rescue a close friend from this nightmare by applying his custom AI architecture to the problem. Let's break down the mechanics of how this job finder actually operates.
Okay, so every morning, bright and early at 6:15 a.m., the agent wakes up and sweeps different tiers of job boards. It takes every single role it finds and scores it on a scale of 0 to 10. But it doesn't just guess. It scores the roles against a very strict markdown profile file that Paul created specifically for that friend.
And a markdown file is basically just, a text document?
Yeah, it's just a simple plain text document, no complex code, just basic bullet points formatting text.
So in this plain text cheat sheet, Paul laid out his friends' target lanes, geography rules, and this is key, absolute deal breakers.
Yes, the inclusion of strict deal breakers is such a vital design choice. And AI can easily get confused by like aspirational preferences, but it understands negative constraints perfectly.
Right, like no mandatory languages the candidate doesn't speak.
Exactly, or no roles in the defense industry. It grounds the AI's scoring logic in strict reality, which prevents it from hallucinating a so-called perfect fit that actually violates a core boundary.
And the output is incredibly restrained, which I really appreciate. The agent emails the friend just 3 to 5 roles that scored a 6 or above. That is the entire payload. Crucially, it provides a single-sentence reason why the job fits the markdown profile and a single-sentence concern about why it might not. And the operating costs for all of this, just a couple of dollars a day.
But the most profound design choice in this whole system isn't what the agent sends. It's what the agent refuses to send. Paul instituted what he calls the empty digest rule.
The empty digest rule, I love this. So if the agent sweeps all the boards and finds absolutely no roles that score a 6 or higher, it sends nothing. It just goes back to sleep.
Which is so hard to do.
Yeah.
Most people would be so tempted to pad the email with mediocre jobs just to prove the software is actually doing something.
Right, to justify the bill.
Yeah. But Paul realized that an empty digest is actually worse than no digest. Because if you send mediocre results, you actively teach the human to stop opening the email. You literally train them to ignore the tool.
That decision demonstrates such deep empathy for the user's attention. And Paul draws another boundary that is equally important: his absolute refusal to automate the actual job application process.
Yes. This is a massive temptation in the AI space right now.
Yeah.
Everyone wants an agent that will autofill applications and click submit 1,000 times a day.
But Paul flat out refuses. The way I interpret his stance, it's kind of like using a highly trained truffle pig.
A truffle pig.
Yeah, think about it. The AI is this tireless, hyper-focused animal that can scour the forest for hours to uncover the absolute rarest, most perfect ingredients, but you do not want the pig cooking your dinner.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Right. The human still has to take those ingredients, assess them, write the cover letter, and actually cook the meal. Discovery is agent work, the decision and the presentation of yourself to an employer that stays human. Because if you automate the application, you just flood the market with garbage and ruin the channel for everyone.
And auto-applying removes human judgment, which is literally the singular element that matters when you're trying to convince another human to hire you.
Exactly.
But, the real irony of this entire project is that the elements Paul thought would be the most impressive turned out to be the least interesting.
The surprise inversion. He admits he thought the complex web scraping and the 0 to 10 scoring algorithms would be the real magic of the system. They weren't. The real magic was the reply loop.
Yeah, the system closes the loop using the exact same architecture we discussed earlier. So when the friend gets that morning email with the 3 jobs, they can just hit reply. They might type a single casual sentence like, this one is too senior, I want a builder track, not an executive track.
And then the agent receives that plain text email, reads the natural language, and routes it straight through that capture classify graduate pipeline. It automatically updates the bullet points in the markdown profile file to adjust those career lanes.
So the very next morning, the digest is sharper, having learned from just a simple email reply. The humble parts, a plain text file he initially totally underestimated, and a basic email reply, they did the heavy lifting, not the complex scraping algorithms.
It's amazing. And Paul points out that the victory in all of this isn't when the code compiles perfectly on his machine. The victory happens 2 weeks in when his friend replies to the morning digest and simply says, the email got useful.
Which is a much more profound metric for success than like GitHub stars or active user counts.
Let me quote Paul's exact sentiment here because it really anchors the entire discussion. He says, not productivity, not scale, not a leaderboard, just helping someone you love. Or, as he put it, just one person, one morning, 3 roles, and a reason for each. He spent 2 years breaking his own code, failing, and learning, just so he could eventually build something that genuinely helped someone he cares about.
It perfectly resolves the paradox we started with. The artifact isn't the point. The understanding is the point, because understanding allows you to care for people in these highly, highly specific ways.
Let's pull all of this together for the listener. Paul starts with these messy, broken, self-built tools. By refusing to take the easy pre-built route, he gains this intimate understanding of how AI variables connect. And that hard-won knowledge allows him to build a bespoke corrections loop that actually learns his preferences. He then takes that deeply personal architecture, points it outward, and creates a customized application for a friend that a generic, out-of-the-box tool could never replicate.
Because a generic tool doesn't know your specific career deal breakers. It can't instantly adapt its entire scoring logic based on a one-line email from your best friend.
Exactly. But before we wrap up, there is a concept raised by a reader named Maria Edlenborg Mortensen in the comments of Paul's post, and it kind of pushes this whole conversation into entirely new territory.
Yeah, Maria's observation is incredibly sharp. She points out that once an AI starts learning effectively from human feedback, deciding what deserves to become memory ceases to be just a technical problem.
Right. She calls it an epistemic governance problem, which is a heavy term.
It really is. So epistemology is the study of knowledge, basically, how we know what we know. Epistemic governance, in this context, means managing the reality your AI constructs about you.
Wow. Okay, so break that down.
Well, think about it. When you send a correction to your agent, is that correction a temporary preference because you just happen to be in a bad mood that afternoon? Is it a contradiction to a rule you firmly set yesterday? Or is it a genuine, permanent improvement to your workflow?
That is such a fascinating question for the listener to think about. As your digital tools learn to mimic you with greater and greater accuracy, how do you distinguish between those fleeting moods and your core values? If your personal AI agent is slowly becoming a digital reflection of you, how do you govern which parts of you it's actually allowed to permanently remember?
You're no longer just debugging code at that point. You are actively curating a digital version of your own judgment.
Yeah, buying a pre-built app is easy. But when you build the system yourself and you govern exactly how it learns from your actions, you aren't just building software, you're choosing exactly who you are becoming in the process. We will see you in the trenches.